Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from or whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for all of the support, the kind messages, all the things that you've sent my way, the show's way. Really do appreciate all of those. Really appreciate hearing your guys' questions that you have or suggestions that you want for topics. That's really, really cool. Keep all that coming, and really excited to have you here as we talk about our topic today, which is being an attentive coach. And I think that it's a really interesting topic to talk about because as coaches, we have so many things that we have going on, and there's so many things we have to pay attention to, not just, of course, on the X's and O's side, but also all the other things that come with running a program and managing a program. And we have to make sure that we're able to be attentive to all those different aspects. And so what we'll get into today is we'll talk about being an attentive coach and what it looks like to pay attention to what's going on with your players, build those relationships, motivate players, all of the things that go into being a coach who not only cares about the basketball side, but also is very attentive to the players that you're coaching as well. So we're going to dive into that today with my guest, who is currently head boys basketball coach at Burnsville High School. Coach Erik Leafblad is joining us here today. Coach, again, really appreciate you being able to carve out some time to talk to us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's cold up here in Minnesota, so we're all bundled up trying to stay warm. But I'm happy to be with you and
Awesome.
happy to share some thoughts. So
Awesome. Can't relate personally, me being in Phoenix right now, but I grew up in the Midwest, so I know how those winters could be. So yeah, I appreciate it, Coach. Let's go ahead and jump in with you and share with our listeners, Coach, about your basketball journey, your coaching journey, and talk us through ultimately how you ended up at Burnsville.
yeah, it's actually kind of a cool little serendipitous story. I played basketball Division III through college. And coming out of college, I had like this like Robert Frost, like two paths in front of me kind of thing. Was trying to figure out if I wanted to be an academic or wanted to be a basketball coach. And I went the route of academics and went on to grad school and ended up becoming a professor. So I kind of thought like basketball coaching was like gone. Then I had kids and started coaching my son through traveling, like our traveling program in our community up here, and ended up like it was in the Burnsville community here in Minnesota. Ended up his freshman year, got asked to be the freshman coach by the coach who was there at the time. So I stepped into that role. And then his wife got a different job, so they moved, and he was the third coach in 5 years. So then I ended up becoming the fourth coach in 6 years at Burnsville High School.
Wow.
So Burnsville's been like kind of one of these sort of unstable places in some ways, and I just felt this, I guess, compulsion or calling, you might even say, to try and provide some stability um, for a bunch of young men who I think needed somebody to believe in them and kind of step into a program that's kind of been struggling for a while, and say
Mhm.
maybe invite them to see their own community and themselves in a different way. So I kind of ended up back in coaching by accident, but it's been the gift of my life. I tell people I really did not imagine I'd be back kind of at a high level coaching. We play in the kind of one of the top conferences in the state of Minnesota for the biggest schools in Minnesota. So it's a pretty high level environment. And I'm yeah, like I said, I kind of thought that life was done about 25 years ago, and lo and behold, it kind of came back to me. So really grateful that I get to do that as part of my vocation in the world. So it's a good thing.
No, that's phenomenal. Love how sometimes we as coaches, maybe or get away from the game, or former players ourselves, and then like we find ourselves back, right? We find ourselves back
Yep.
into it one way or the other. That's awesome. Coach, I wanted to talk a little bit about before we dive into the topic of being an attentive coach. I wanted to talk a little bit about from an X's and O's standpoint, what it is that you like to run philosophically. What do you like to run in terms of X's and O's offensively and defensively, and kind of talk us through the building blocks of making sure that you can put that system in the right way, or how you've put that system in the way that you want it.
Yeah. I am X's and O's. Offensively, we run a lot of kind of Princeton offense concepts. I think a lot of people are kind of doing that kind of thing, trying to play into space, right? And space off of each other. So we do a ton of concept building in we get 2 months that we can work with our guys in the summer. So we do a lot of kind of yeah, just concept building, like what does spacing off of each other look like? Uh, we try to we try to convince guys who are prone to dribble to maybe dribble a little bit less and move the ball uh, with the pass first, while also playing to our strengths. But yeah, we like to play kind of a 5 out, a lot of split screen action, a lot of undercuts, back cuts, that kind of stuff, to try and create advantages as much as we can, and then keep those advantages once we get them. Um, Defensively, I grew up in Wisconsin in the era of Dick Bennett. So if you play anything other than sort of pack line man-to-man defense, you'll get kicked out of coaching. So we are almost I've been almost strictly man-to-man, but um, recently, just because I'm having to find myself having to play some underclassmen who are doing a fantastic job for us, but game's still a little bit too fast for them at times, and so we've tried
Hmm.
to slow it down a little bit with some zone, which is growth for me to listen to my assistant coaches a little bit, because again, like I said, in the world that I grew up in learning basketball, there is no such thing as zone defense. So we play a little bit of a 3-2 matchup. So I can't get away from the man-to-man principles, but we do some 3-2 matchup to kind of hide some of the youth that we're forced to play right now. So
Yeah, and I imagine that gets even more. I don't know if tricky is the right word, but you talked about the strength of schedule that you have, and some of the competition that you're playing. So when you have a younger group, I imagine you have to try and get as creative as possible as you can to try and find some success on that end of the floor, knowing you're probably going against some really strong teams.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, every night we're playing teams that have future college basketball players on their teams, and our league is, I think, the best coach league in the state of Minnesota. This stuff, we got guys who've been coaching for 39, 40 years at high schools, and they're basketball savants. I learn as much by scouting, like, oh, we could run that set. Um, as you know, as just kind of anything. I feel really privileged to coach in this league, but yeah, it's hard. And when we have a decent group of seniors, but we've got 2 or 3 sophomores that we have to play. And so yeah, in a league like ours that's really senior laden and really good, really well coached. Yeah, there's times where we have to, um, yeah, like I said, slow the game down for those young guys to kind of help them be successful.
And this kind of transitions into our topic about being an attentive coach, but I felt that this was kind of a good place for me to kind of ask this follow-up question. When you're facing such, strong competition, and games are tough, and your guys are playing against these really top teams. I know that potentially guys can get, a little frustrated, or they can get, maybe a little bit down, because I mean it's tough, and it's a grind, especially to
Mhm.
having to be that precise, and have to play that clean of a game to be competing with these top teams. So I wanted to ask you about how you as a coach kind of keep your guys like focused, how you keep them like kind of ready day in and day out, knowing that they're facing, such tough competition on a regular basis.
Yeah, we as a staff, I think, have spent a lot of time talking about, well, a couple of things like adversity, not being something to run away from,
Hmm.
but adversity being that I guess I think one of the greatest teachers that there is in sports. And so we try to remind we try to remind our guys almost every day um, that the adversity that they're going through in game, in the midst of a season, in the course of the grind of a long season, that adversity is not it's not that's not the barometer of who they are as players and who they are as young
Hmm.
men. That's the thing that teaches them and helps them grow into who they are as players and young men. So for me, it's I do a lot of in practice. I do a lot of kind of I have really good coaching staff, so I let them do a lot of the X's and O's. I trust them to know what I'm asking them to put in place, and then I like to stand back and kind of gauge body language. I think body language is one of the most
Yeah.
important sort of revealers of where guys are at in a given moment. And so then I'm doing a lot of like just walking upside a guy after we take him out of a drill or something, putting my arm around him, reminding him of that the reason he's on the floor is because we believe in him, those kinds of things. So for me, that sort of the just the reading my guys as much as I can, and asking questions too, like, well, where are you at? Like, it seems like you're somewhere else. What's going on? And then just reminding them like that we inherently believe in them, that regardless of outcome and results, we see more for who they are than maybe they even see for themselves. It's one of the key ways I think I try to read my guys is just pay attention. Yeah, pay attention to those cues, those body language cues. I think it was Gino Oriama who said body language screams, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
such a truism for coaches. And I try to be. I'm really involved, obviously, in practice and in planning, but I try to be able to step back and pay attention to those things because I think the success even of a practice depends on making sure that everybody can be as fully present as they're capable of being in
Right.
those moments.
And so that's a perfect transition as we fully, kind of dive into the concept of being an attentive coach. And of course, that all starts with relationship building, because I think to your point of what you said earlier about knowing body language, knowing some of these things, a lot of it comes down to having relationships with your players so that you're able to, really know when something seems a little bit different because you know that player really well. So I wanted to ask you, Coach, about how do you go about the process of building as well as maintaining relationships
Mhm.
through your players throughout the year? So talk about your relationship building process that you have with your players.
Yeah, I think for me, presence is really important. Um, and so I try to be. I don't actually work at the high school. I teach at a university that's on the other side of town from the high school. So that can make it hard. A lot of the coaches in our league, they're teachers, so they're there all the time, so they have natural touch points. So for me, I have to work really hard about
Mm.
what presence looks like. And so in the off seasons, um, we do a lot of morning stuff. Like we have captains that are fantastic. They get the guys up and get them in the gym at 6 a.m. For skill work and open gym and stuff like that. And I can't coach them, but just being around and being present there. So I'm, interacting with them as they come, out to get a drink of water or something like that. Um, and that seems really simple, but I think that kind of presence is really significant for especially for the young men in our program. They see that there's a willingness for me to go sort of outside of um, the normal routine of a coach, just to say like I'm here, and my presence is here for you. Um, in season and out of season. So I think one thing is I just try to be really present. And then the other thing I really focus on is I ask them about, and again, this probably seems simple, but I think it's in the
Hmm.
midst of a season, it's some of the stuff that we can forget as coaches. I ask them about stuff that isn't basketball as much as I can. I want to know, like, if you're going to college, like how's the school search going? You know, we've had players this year who've lost grandparents, and just checking in with them, you know, asking about how you doing with your grief, and talking them through grief, and like being able to really you know, not shy away from the stuff that isn't basketball related. You know, we've had people go through breakups, and they're high school boys, right? Like they want to act like they're not affected, but we know it affects them. And so I'm
Yeah.
just trying to know their life, know the contours of their life, know their home life as much as they're willing to let me. And yeah, just really being present. Then I think the other side of that is like, if we're asking those sorts of moves towards vulnerability of them, then I as a coach have to be equally vulnerable. So I'm a crier. Like I'm one of those guys who kind of sometimes wears my emotions on the surface. And so when I'm going through stuff, my guys know. Obviously, I have boundaries. I'm not, you know, sharing the deepest, darkest stuff with them, but they know when I'm struggling. And there's days even at practice where I'll show up and I'll be like, "Hey guys, I'm going through some hard stuff right now. So if you see me just a little bit more disengaged, it might be because I'm struggling to be as present as I should be." And so you guys have permission to invite me into being fully present when you see me slipping, just like I do with you. So I think that relationship piece goes both ways, right? The biggest key to developing that relationship is reminding myself, but also reminding them that like the relationship is the context into which basketball fits. It's not the reason for basketball is not the reason for the relationship. I think sometimes we as coaches think we're being relational, or think we're building a relationship, but what we're really doing is using that relationship for some other end that we want for our guys, right? Like we're trying to use the relationship to get them to buy into something, and we hope there's buy-in, of course, but like I think that the key for us is to remind ourselves that like relationships matter in and of themselves, regardless of the basketball side of things. And so basketball is the environment in which I get the privilege to be in relationship with these young men, not the reason that
Right.
I don't have the relationship so that they'll do what I want as a coach, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that sometimes as coaches, going back to something that you mentioned previously, sometimes we don't want to show emotion, or we don't want to like come off doing that. We want to be like strong and stoic, and act like we're all knowing and nothing ever affects us. But I think that players probably get actually a little bit of like relief knowing that we are human, and that we go through things, and that we have emotions and have these experiences, because then I think our players feel like they could in turn express what those feelings are, because they know that it's okay for them to do, because their coach, somebody who's probably a role model to them, is also demonstrating those feelings. And I imagine your players probably feel a little bit more willing, or a little bit more open to, come and talk to you about things, or answer questions maybe a little bit more honestly, because of the honesty that you show them in return.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the hope, right? That like, I think, you know, I think sometimes like the mistakes I've made in the past as a coach have been, um, kind of rooted in this sense of like, I don't want them to see I don't want them to see like my faults. I don't want them to see like the things
Hmm.
that I need to grow through, right? And this year in particular has been a really kind of growing season for me as a coach. Just some of the my son plays for me. He's one of our captains, and he kind of held up a mirror for me earlier in the season where he said, "Dad, I think I get where your intensity can come from, but I think you also need to know like there's guys on our team that are scared of you." Um, because I can get into guys a little bit sometimes, maybe a little too, not maybe, definitely a little too much. And that was like really important for me to hear. Um, Number one, that my son would have the courage and the willingness to say that's pretty important. But number two, to like really reflect on that and take that to heart. And it's coincided then with like a pretty significant shift in how I show up for my guys. I talk all the time about that with them of like, hey, I'm trying to be the guy you need me to be. And what that does is I think it gives them permission to like uh not be where they want to be yet, but strive to be where they want to be, right? Like it's like we are this season, we talk about the process all the time, but I don't think we always give them, or I don't know, I haven't always given them like tangible things that are part of that process. And so I think as they've seen me move through that process this year and really become kind of a different coach for them, it's allowed them to step into the incremental nature of their own improvement. And I'm hopeful, like the X's and O's of it thing, I'm hopeful like that sort of like higher level philosophical thing will start to pay off here later in the season where we start to realize like, hey, we've made some growth. Now let's translate that growth to on-court success too. So yeah, I mean, I think that vulnerability and that willingness to really share your own journey, I guess, with the guys gives them permission to do that relationally off the court, but I think also in the
Hmm.
context of the game itself as well.
And so I'm curious as kind of a follow-up to that about what do you do, or what are you maybe more cognizant of in terms of like your emotional reactions to maybe, I'm not going to say dial down your emotions, but be more aware of it so that you're not, speaking in a way that's going to, really upset your players, or say something out of emotion that's going to be like really, harmful or impactful that you may regret later. How have you kind of learned like the process of kind of emotional like regulation and making sure that
Yeah.
like what you're saying to your guys is not something that's going to be, you know, uh, taken in a way that you don't intend to because of the emotion behind the statement?
Yeah, for me, it's been a lot of the change that I've kind of gone through this season. It's been journaling, honestly.
Mm,
I journal every day. Um, every morning, I just reflect on like where am I at emotionally in terms of my own sense of self, my own self concept, and then I usually turn that into reflection on okay, how's that going to help me show up in an authentic and real way with my guys. And what it does is it kind of lines up the stuff that's going on inside of me or orders it in such a way that when I feel that maybe that compulsion to react rather than respond, um, I'm able to pause and slow down. I think the other thing too is like as that journaling has given me such a sense of self-awareness, it's allowed me to invite my coaching staff to help me regulate too. I'll give you an example. On Friday night, I didn't think we had the best officiating crew in the world. Um, maybe the way no, they're fine. They weren't having their best night. We'll put it that way.
hmm.
And
Okay.
and I was getting pretty frustrated. And often what pulls me out of being available to my guys in the way they need me to be is when I start getting really frustrated with officials. And so my assistants were also kind of complaining a little bit about the officiating, and I just had I kind of paused and I said, asked myself like, what do I need right now? I need not to have that tendency compounded. So I just turned to him and I said, "Hey, nothing from you guys about the officials. No more conversation. I can't be who I need to be for the guys if you guys are filling my head with that right now." And so I think that for me has been really that I don't think I ever would have said that to my coaching staff uh, before I started kind of into this practice of journaling and sort of
Yeah.
ordering my inner world. It's just that's been really, really powerful for me in terms of like showing up for my guys and showing up in the right way. It's made me attentive both to myself and to my players. And it's been, it's a discipline. It takes some commitment, but it's pretty easy to to just,
Hmm.
you know, sit down every morning with a cup of coffee and uh, order my inner life a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's nice. I think that there's so much value in that. There's so many, thoughts and feelings and emotions that we go through that having a place to get them out and write them somewhere and journal them. I think it's a nice way probably to kind of get your mind right and be able to let go maybe in a way, or just at least be able to put
Yeah,
in words some of the things that you're feeling. Because sometimes if you don't get them down, or write them down, I imagine they might come out in other ways that you don't necessarily want them to. So I imagine it's a nice, kind of exercise to get those thoughts and feelings kind of out there in a maybe an organized manner, so to speak.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Coach about, and you're going through this right now too, about, it's a long season, a lot of competition. I know the level of competition you're going against is pretty high. So what goes into, keeping your program, focused and competing and making sure that they're able to last, for a lack of a better term, throughout the long season? How do you,
Mhm.
as, being an attentive coach, kind of notice and pay attention to, okay, we need to, speed up here, slow down here, we need to, take a break here? How do you kind of go through that process of making sure your guys are kind of ready, to make it throughout the whole season?
Yeah, I think the one thing we as a staff have been pretty intentional about this year is creating really good feedback loops. I think sometimes what I've done in the past, and I think what other coaches have done in the past, is that um, rather than actually invite feedback and ask like where are we at, like where are we at as a guys, like talk to me, right? Instead we sort of look at, okay, our effort hasn't been great, or our energy seems down, and then we sort of build the narrative around that and then project that narrative onto our guys. And one of the things that when we do like film sessions, which I think most coaches are doing film sessions, right? Like I tend to try and start those film sessions by just asking, uh, not about what we're going to watch or anything, but like where are we at? Like how are we feeling? And what it does is it either validates and confirms my sense of where we might be, um, or it challenges that too. Sometimes I've been wrong. I feel like oh, we're really discouraged and our confidence is really low, and then I discover like actually they're pretty okay. They're doing all right, and it's a long season, so they're just tired, and being tired is okay, right?
Hmm.
So for me, I think the number one thing for trying to help our guys get through a long season, and a season that's for us this year has been hard, has been being really intentional about those feedback loops. What are the ways that um, we're letting the team sort of define and name the story of our season. Um, and obviously we want to speak into that too as coaches, because sometimes, like teenage boys don't always have the best uh, insight into what's really going on, but it's important for them to be able to name and articulate what they're going through. So feedback loops are really important. And then like deviation and flexibility with your plan um,
Hmm.
can be important. I had a plan around the holidays, for instance. We had some time in the gym between. We had a decent little break between games, and so I was like, "This is great. This is a chance for us to install a bunch of new stuff and like really build some basketball stuff." And then had some conversation with our captains and a couple other guys that are leaders on our team, and they were feeling uh, like they were like, the game doesn't feel as fun as it has in the past. And so I deviated from the plan of trying to install a bunch of new stuff. And we just did like a program wide 3-on-3 tournament. And that was
Okay.
really important because it was just fun, right? And so I think those are building those feedback loops is really important, and then listening to them. And that's maybe the hardest thing for us as coaches, because we as coaches, like we're planners, right? Like we're usually high achieving type people who have goals and have plans on how to reach those goals. And I think sometimes at least for me, the hardest thing in the past has been a bit of stubbornness of like, no, this is the way you get there. And sometimes diversions and stepping off the path is okay too. And so I think really being responsive to those feedback loops and being okay with flexibility is a really good way to begin to do some of that work.
Yeah, and I have done things that are like somewhat similar to that. And I imagine that free on free thing that you did, I'm sure players just had a blast with it. I'm sure it was such a fun way for them
Yeah.
to, be able to do something, but it's just different from, just the X's and O's grind, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
That's
it was super fun to watch them just like smile and goof around.
awesome.
And also like the other thing too is like we in the it was like program wide, right? So there were like freshmen
Mm,
through seniors, and we kind of forced them not to play with guys that are on their level team, right? And you started to actually see like, oh, this kid can actually play a little bit more than I thought he could. And so we even from like a program assessment thing, we realized like we might need to get that kid a couple JV minutes or something
yeah.
moving forward. So you discover some new things, I think, too, when you kind of allow yourself to be surprised by what your team actually needs. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Attentiveness, coach, really important in those in-game situations to make sure that you're attentive and that you're engaged and you're there in the moment, knowing time and situation, knowing the things that are going on. Um, how do you kind of demonstrate that attentiveness, and how have you kind of worked on that skill of being an attentive coach during those in-game situations? What do you sort of pick up on or notice, or how do you sort of gauge, for lack of a better term, like where your team is at mentally and emotionally and all the other things that go on during those in-game situations?
yeah, I actually think it's Roy Williams used to talk about how like he did very little X's and O's and timeouts because he felt like what's he really going to adjust in game? We've already worked on it in practice. So he was so much more focused on like player performance, right? Meaning from the emotional side to the execution side of things. Um, so for me, like a lot of what I do is there's I mean, high school guys are different than college guys, right? They're they're a little bit more. Uh, Sometimes you got to corral them execution wise, maybe a little bit more. But I do like every free throw. I'm bringing my point guard or two of my guards over, and most of the conversation is like uh, related to like how are we? Like what do we need? And not necessarily in terms of again of X's and O's, but like what are we tired? Do we need a timeout? So I'm giving away some of the control that I think we as coaches tend to hold on to. I'm asking them, what do you want to run? What feels good right now? Are we okay? Do we need to slow down? Do we need to take a deep breath? Like where are we at? Uh, I think it's really about some for me, some of paying attention to that is like reminding through the way that I ask questions and through the way that I communicate with the guys during the game that like this whole thing really is a co-constructed thing. Like we're doing this together. This is not just you implementing what I want you to do. This is us building something together even in game. And I think that allows them to stay, or I hope that allows them to stay
Hmm.
focused on the task that's in front of them, which is competing at a really high level. When I know things aren't going well is when I see uh, the frustration of competition coming out through reactions to calls or reactions to mistakes.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and often for me, I think this is one of the skills that especially head coaches need to develop is that like we talk about focus, but really, I think your job, one of our jobs as head coaches, is to actually have the broadest focus of anyone because a game, in essence, is an environment, right? And there's energy and there's emotion and there's all sorts of things that are part of that environment. And I think part of our task as coaches is to be really, really attentive to the full environment of what's going on because that's often what's shaping the way that our players are performing and the way that they're responding to the game. We tell them ignore the crowd. That's hard. I mean, crowds are loud. We want them
Yeah.
to often ignore the crowd, but it's a difficult thing to do that. And so I think it's just being a really good interpreter, I guess, of the environment of a basketball game. For us, a couple Saturdays ago, for instance, our parents, whom I love to death, forgot that their primary job is to cheer for our guys and decided that their primary job was to yell at officials. And over the course of a game, I started to notice like guys who usually have pretty good composure on the court were losing their composure. And so then I started to clue in, oh man, yeah, our parents have no composure today. And so
Mm.
for me, I called a timeout, and rather than address some X's and O's, which we probably needed to do. We weren't really executing very well. But instead, I just pulled him into the huddle, and I said, like, I'm not sure what's going on in the gym today, but like I need you to feed off of my energy, not your parents. I said it loud enough so our parents could hear too. Um, and the whole point, and again, it wasn't to like shame the parents. It was to remind everyone, like, hey, like this whole thing is kind of a symbiotic relationship, and if the energy's bad from our crowd and from our parents, like that will impact our guys, and we can overcome that as a team. And that was the point of the timeout, was to say, feed off of me, right? Like we're not going to change the officiating, we're not going to change the way they're making calls. You're not going to see me get really mad at them. I'm going to ask questions and be curious about what they're calling, but that's it. And so I said, focus on me. That's who I want you to focus on. Ignore everything else that's going on. But I think that's really one of the skills that head coaches have to work hard on and develop really well, is like what's the energy, what's the dynamic, what's the environment that our players are responding to. And that I think is I as I've started to I think do that more as a coach, it's allowed me to really be available to my guys in the ways that I think they need me to be. It's allowed me to say, like, this guy needs a little kick in the butt. Like, he needs to get motivated. I think I can give him
Mm.
that. Or it's like, I need to take this guy out and remind him, hey, we believe in you. We're going to put you back in a couple minutes, and you're going to make that next shot. Um, so just seeing the full sort of complexity of a basketball game and a basketball game environment and interpreting that for our guys, I think has been one of the ways that I think help them show up a little bit better as young men and as basketball players.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way that, you brought up to the point, the way that players will respond to the actions of whether it's people in the crowd, like you said, or whether it's things that your coaches are doing. And I think that's something that's really important to do. And, I've definitely started, doing this a lot more, is I will look back at film and I will watch myself, and I'll look at like what
Yeah.
I'm doing, and I'll look at like my body language and the way that I'm acting, and it's actually led to me making a lot of changes in terms of like my demeanor and the way that I act, because then I try to think to myself like, okay, if I was playing for me, how would I be reacting to the way that I'm acting, as a coach? And I thought, like, I don't know if I'd be at my best. I don't know if I would be, doing everything the way I should be or executing the way that I am. And so I would encourage coaches to do that, is just kind of monitor and just watch what you do and the way that you act. Because I think that the way that we think we act and the way that we actually act, or what we think we say and what we actually say, aren't
Yes.
necessarily always the same. And I think it's a good practice to get into. It's worked for me.
Yeah.
Maybe it would for others. I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I think
Go
that's
ahead.
I think that's great advice, right? Yeah, um I think just being able to like align yourself with how you actually want to show up is really important. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I sit a lot more than I ever used to. I used to be pacing up and down, this, that, whatever, calling out a lot, and I've really changed a lot of that. And I think what I realized is that I think I was, pacing, doing all these other things that I was doing. I think it's because maybe I didn't trust my players, I didn't trust my team enough, and I felt like I needed to be in there and micromanaging everything. And I think I learned that, like, no, if we did all the things we needed to do in practice, and we know what our game plan is and we know what we're trying to do, I just need to let my players play. And so I'll sit there, I'll talk a little bit, but for the most part, I just let them execute. And I found that I think everybody at the end is a lot less stressed and is a lot feels a lot better. And I think the players feel a lot more empowered. But that's just worked for me. And I think that just came from me realizing that like I felt like I didn't trust my team enough that I had to be out there shouting every last direction to them, and it just wasn't working. And so it's a change I know on a personal level I'm glad I made.
Yeah, yeah, that's I mean I've gone through some similar stuff. I would say like my first few years, like I thought coaching was like constantly talking to them, and now I'm just kind of like I can't sit. I have too much nervous energy to sit, but I don't
Yeah,
talk as much. I just or the talking that I do is much more like encouragement rather than do this, do that, jump to the ball, do that. Like they know if they forget, like remind them. Otherwise, like let them play. I hated coaches that micromanaged me, right? Like I wanted to
yeah,
play, and so I think that's really good advice. And yeah, I mean I feel better too. Like I'm less tired and I'm less like full of stress. I'm just kind of like, okay,
yeah.
let's do this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a really good point about being attentive to everything that's going on. I don't know if you've been in that situation. I know I have, especially when I was younger, where like I would get fixated on like a missed call, or I'd get fixated on like one thing that happened like 2 minutes ago, and then I'd lose like everything that was happening on the court in front of me, and I wasn't able to, see the big picture because I got focused in on one thing. And that was, I know that's probably been something I've done more than a few times, especially when I was younger. That's probably uh, not helped my players when I'm not seeing everything or paying attention to the big picture because I'm fixated on maybe one small event or one small thing that happened that I either like couldn't get over or I'm still thinking about in some way.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like I think we as coaches, we always tell our players like move on, right? Like you got to move on to the
Yeah.
next play. But gosh, like we often aren't great at moving on to the next play. So I think that's part of what it means to be attentive. Like the game keeps going, which means your players got to keep going too. And if you're still fixated on things that have already happened, then obviously you're not going to be able to attend to them in the way that they need as a coach. So
Yeah. Awesome. Coach, all players are different, and the things that motivate players or the things that you're able to, get that extra bit out of a player is always going to vary player to player. But in your experience, what have you found has worked to, get players to be at their best, to give them that little bit of extra edge or motivation? What is that? I don't know, secret ingredient or magic or whatever it is that you like to
Mhm.
call it that you found has really been successful in motivating players beyond what they think they can do?
Yeah. This might seem like a bizarre answer, but it's actually been about what's going on in me and in how I'm trying to motivate them. And so for me, it's like reminding myself that everything I do as a coach, motivationally, and about these young men, has to come out of like a real sense of love for who they are as a person. Um, and for me, like love has to be uh, it has to be about the uniqueness of who these young men are, and it has to be kind of like non-possessive, meaning I can't make them do what I want them to do. And I think that's been really um, it's been really good for me in terms of then like figuring out what the motivational cues are for each of my players. And it's also like it's given me a place to be non-anxious when as young men they like for whatever reason they don't respond, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's been really freeing for me as a coach, is to say like, some kids are only going to be motivated by playing time, and I can't give them playing time because they're not ready to play. And
Yeah.
the challenge as a coach is to figure I think that, or the temptation as a coach is to like um, presume that there's something like wrong with that kid, right? And it's like,
Right.
no, he's young, he's growing, and so I'm gonna keep trying to figure out what, out of love, like what I can do to motivate him, and also like give him the dignity of being somebody who has his own agency and his own autonomy and just might not agree with me. And he may never play hard for me because he's got that choice, right? And I think that's hard, but I also think like that's the tough side of of really loving kids and young men, is to say like they also have to play their part.
Right.
Um, and so for me, the I guess like the secret to trying to motivate my guys has been like, it goes back to that relationship, like getting to know them as well as I can, so that I can figure out of my love for them, like what might motivate them, and also like then recognizing sometimes that like their lack of motivation isn't a flaw in me. Um, and it's not a flaw in them either. It's just it's just the challenge of what it means to motivate. Like motivating is hard, because you can't, in Minnesota, there's 180 minutes I have for a
Yeah.
game, right? We play 18-minute halves, so I have 180 minutes. I can't give everyone minutes, and that's the easy way to motivate, right? Like Bobby Knight, who said the bench is a great motivator. Yeah, I guess. I also don't totally agree with that. Like, because there's some kids who just, for whatever reason, are they're less skilled. They're not going to play, so you can't really use the bench as a motivator. Um, and again, like so for me anyway, it's love. You got to love. You have to love the uniqueness of who they are, including the ways that they're um, still growing as young men, and figure out what does it mean to love a kid through the hard stuff as much as the stuff when the motivation works. And I believe that love really does triumph over everything. And
Mm,
so sometimes I think like, you have to have you have to take the art, or have to develop the art of the long view, of what motivation looks like. It might that sort of commitment to the uniqueness of who they are, that might not show up until they're out of your program. They might still look at you as the villain for 4 years because you didn't play them enough. But at
yeah.
some point, I really do believe that love will connect and will come home, and at some point they're going to go, oh, I get it now. I get what he was doing. I understand what he was trying to instill in me, or maybe not. And that's also, I think, part of the joy and challenge of being a coach, is like sometimes guys just don't get the message that you're really sending. So
Yeah, and but that's also like you said, it's part of that challenge, right? Of like you as a coach need to be comfortable with the decisions that you made at the end of the day, and obviously we always look to improve in the way that we talk to guys and motivate guys and build relationships with guys. But I think that you have to not beat yourself up necessarily when maybe you didn't have this like amazing breakthrough with a player like during their playing career, and you didn't see that light bulb go off. Like you have to give yourself credit that you did the best you could, and that maybe that light bulb will go off later, and if it doesn't, like like you said, like that's okay too. Maybe there's something that could be learned from that to, for the next time that you have a conversation with that player or a player similar in circumstance to that. But, you bring up also a really, really good point about like I imagine it's difficult for all coaches who are having those conversations, like you said about something about playing time with, certain players who maybe just aren't going to get, enough minutes. And there are things that they, maybe can do, but there are things that maybe are, they're just not able to do, and they're not going to be able to get more playing time over someone else. But I think to kind of an overarching point you kind of brought up is, how can that player still be impactful to the program? What are the other ways that they still are, seen as a valuable member to the program, even if it isn't necessarily playing time in a game? And it seems to me that that's something that's, important to you, is that you want to make sure that your guys know that, they all have value and they all bring something to the program, even if they're not going to be playing equally.
yeah, for sure. We talk a lot at the start of the season, and then we try to revisit it throughout the season, of The phrase that we use in our program is um, all like everyone has a contribution, but you have to be willing to make the contribution you're being asked to make. And I think that's a hard lesson for young men to learn because they're like, no, I want to play 20 minutes a game. It's like, yeah, but that's not the contribution you're being asked to make. Um, and 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 does that phrase work? Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
some guys get it, but not everyone does. But staying really consistent with that, I think, is one of the ways that we show our guys um, the love that really is at the core of what our program is about. Is that like we are consistent. Everything we're trying to do as coaches is congruent with what we said we would do. We're not going to surprise you. We're not going to bait and switch you. Um, and I get that, like, like we have some seniors this year that are playing 1-2 minutes a game, and like a couple of them are kind of frustrated. And
Oh,
we keep saying, like, that we want you with us, we want you here. We've defined the contribution that we think that we're asking you to make. Are you willing to let that be your contribution? And I think that's my hope, I guess, in saying that, is that though in the midst of it right now, it's hard for some of them, and it is. I get it. Like, they're still coming to practice working as hard as the guys that are playing 32 minutes a game. Um, but my hope is that when they look back on their time in our program, they're gonna be able to say, like, I did something that was really hard and I did it really
mm-hmm.
well. And
Yeah.
that to me is like that's the formative side of coaching that in the immediacy of it might be really hard for them to grasp. But I think in retrospect, when they look back, it's something that they'll say that actually shaped and formed me um, for my life.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I really love that point, Coach. Appreciate you mentioning that. I wanted to ask one more quick question, Coach, before we hit our concluding segment. And I was just curious about how, you talk about you personally as a coach being attentive, but also, of course, it's not just you. It's you and a coaching staff as well. And I imagine that, everybody on your coaching staff has a role in being attentive and being engaged and being there for their players. So are there like similar, expectations in terms of that attentiveness of your coaching staff, or does it look a little bit different from a head coach to an assistant? I was just curious about the role that your coaches play in being attentive in their own way, in their own role, whatever that may mean.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as the head coach, like I try to encourage. I have, let's see, one, two. I have 5 assistants throughout our levels. So as a head coach, I'm trying to encourage them to embody kind of that same value of being attentive um, to the young men and to who they are as persons first, and then as basketball players. I think each of our coaches embodies that in a different way. Um, but it's a constant part of the way that we talk about everything. When we start to get frustrated and slip into, like, man, this kid just won't do it, it's like, okay, let's pause, let's slow down, let's ask, like, why do we feel that way right now about him?
Hmm.
So it is an expectation. I'll put it that way. And it's one of the things that I use to assess kind of where my coaches are at. And it's one of the things we talk about in the postseason, like, how well did we do this year? How well did we make this the central part of what we're about? And also, I think I've had a couple coaches that have left. I think part of the reason they left is, like, for them, the X's and O's is all they really wanted to do. And they kind of get frustrated that we spend a lot of time on stuff that isn't X's and O's. We spend a ton of time on X's and O's. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong. Like,
yeah,
I'm watching film all the time and all that, but that's not the core uh, of the program that I'm trying to build and trying to run. And so, um, but what I think is really good about that is that it's really clear to any coach that would want to be part of this, that, like, this is what it means to be a coach at Burnsville. And if your way of coaching can align with this, then you're probably a great fit. If it's not, if you have a different philosophy, a different approach, then it's going to feel it's going to feel a little bit odd, and it's going to feel a little bit like it doesn't make sense. And that's okay. There's different approaches, but for us,
Right.
this is pretty central. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a certain, just standard in terms of the expectations of what it means to be a coach at Burnsville, and if it fits with what your philosophy is, great, but if not, then, there's there's other places that have different philosophies that
That's
might work
right.
for other coaches, and it might work for different people's philosophies as well, is kind of the sense I'm getting.
Yeah, definitely.
To wrap up, Coach, there's a couple of questions I ask every guest, so I'll go ahead and start right away with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. What is a specific moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing our listeners would be able to learn from?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of my favorite moments as a coach, my first game as a head coach, we won 105 to 98. Um, the reason I share that, and I think this is something that people can learn from, is I am not a let's fly up and down the court, score 105 points, allow 98 points, and feel really good about ourselves kind of coach. Like I want to get stops. I want to run systems. We were just chucking shots, and I think the reason that's important is like this is literally my first game as a varsity head coach, and it's a style of play that I totally never wanted to play. And I think it was one of those moments where I went, all right, this is going to be different than I thought it was. Um, and I think that's a great, it's sort of a great, like if I were going to write a book about what I'm learning as a coach, like that's probably the title of the book. This is going to be different than I thought it was. So
Hmm.
I think that's a story or episode in my coaching career that like I would hold up maybe for younger coaches or other coaches, like just expect the unexpected because that's really what coaching is.
Yeah, it would be nice if we knew everything that was going to happen ahead of time and could just plan meticulously for it, right?
Yeah,
Doesn't quite
exactly.
work out that way. Awesome. Coach, to wrap up, I
Nope.
give every guest what I like to call this 60-second soapbox, but you can go over 60 seconds. It's just a cute little title I like to put to things, but I like to use it,
Sure.
Coach, as a way for you to kind of get out kind of a final message, a closing thought, a closing idea, something that you just kind of want to leave the listeners with. You can take it any direction you want, basketball wise or coaching or otherwise. It's your soapbox after all. So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor and just let you take it from here.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks. I think the thing that I would say, maybe the undercurrent of on everything I've been sharing today is like if you're in coaching, it's not always fun. It's not always easy. Oftentimes it's hard, but it should be full of joy. And it's a game after all, and doesn't mean it's not serious. It doesn't mean we're not competitive and those kinds of things, but it should give you great joy. Kind of my way back into coaching, as I said at the outset, was sort of surprised me, caught me by surprise that I'm back in the game in the way that I'm in. And it's just been a gift of joy to get to do that. And so, amidst a long season, amidst all the hard stuff, for all the coaches out there, I would just remind you, like, take a moment and reflect on those things that you get to do, not have to do, the things that give you joy, and remember that it's your players who probably bring you the most joy, even if they bring you the most challenges too. So, yeah.
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned that, right? Because I think about like all of these things that, I've been personally doing for this season, all the things that are going on, this, that, or whatever. And now I'm like thinking about like, oh wow, like, sooner, very, very soon this senior night's coming up, and oh, I got these seniors, and like this is it. I only got like this little bit of time
Yep.
left for them, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, like I get to step back here and enjoy these moments and enjoy what, like you said, what I get to do, which is to be around these seniors still for a little bit longer. Not something I have to do, but it's just so funny how quickly this time goes by. And sometimes
Yep.
we don't allow ourselves to enjoy the moments when we're in it. And, because we're always focused on what's next. So I kind of like that. Like for me personally, it's like slow down a little bit and, and enjoy the things that you get to do and all the fun privileges that come with coaching because it does fly by fast, doesn't it?
It does for sure. Yep, my son's a senior, so like
Oh, wow.
that this is a huge year for me to remember that. I'm really trying to savor the next. We have 3 weeks left in our regular season, so I'm really trying to be like focus in on this is it with him. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, imagine. Awesome. Coach Leafblad, I really appreciate you coming on here and spending some time talking about everything regarding being an attentive coach and what that looks like and motivation and relationship building and all those great things. I really do appreciate you coming on here. I know that you have real tough season in ways so far this year, but hopefully things finish strong and really looking forward to continuing to follow you in your program's journey. So thanks again, Coach. Really do appreciate you coming on.
yeah, privileged to be a guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.